Hi everybody, this is Carmen from Easy Language. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to my Introduction to Cantonese series. So in the third lesson today, I'll be teaching you about the finals in Jyutping. So I'm going to talk to you all about something called a no audible release. So what is a no audible release? It is a stop with no audible release. It is also known as an unreleased stop or an plosive. It is a stop consonant with no release burst, no audible indication at the end of its occlusion. Sounds very technical, right? No worries. So in Cantonese, final consonants P, T and K have no audible release, which means that we do not articulate the P, T and K sounds as you normally would in English. Bear in mind, only the final consonants P, T and K. Okay, so only when P, T and K are used at the end of a word do we not sound out the P, T and K. If it is an initial, if you've watched my last lesson, you would know, if it is an initial, we do sound the P, T and K sounds. Okay, so to learn more about that, refer back to my previous video. So in practice, it will sound or look like you are about to pronounce these consonants, but stopped before the sound comes out. So your mouth will still form the shape of the consonant, okay, but the sound is not articulated. So I'll also give you an example with the P. Okay, so with the P, it's a labial consonant, which means that our lips close. Okay, so they're touching each other. So your mouth will still look like this. Okay, so when you're pronouncing, so let's say for example, tap. Okay, if you're pronouncing something like tap, you will still be like tap. Okay, so your mouth still closes to represent the P sound, but you don't pronounce the sound. You don't articulate the sound. So instead of going tap, you say tap. Okay, so that is an example of a no audible release in a Cantonese final consonant. Right, let's move on to the finals now. So there are about 58 finals in Jyutping, as opposed to initials where there are only 19. So there are a lot more. Okay, so let's start. Here's your first list, beginning with a double A. So phonemic pronunciation is ah, and the English equivalent is like ah from far. Example, sa, which means sand. AAI is pronounced I. So I couldn't find a English equivalent for this, but I put the kind of how it should sound in there anyways. Okay, so it's ah, okay, ah as in somebody screaming, but a little bit less dramatic. So ah, and then E. I. Okay, I. So an example would be gai, which means street. AAU is like owl from cow. So example, tao, which means nest. AAM is am, as in camera. Example, Sam, which is the number 3. AAN is pronounced an, as in can. Example would be san, which means mountain. Okay. AANG, okay, is like ang, like hang. Example, hang, which means to walk. AAP, so as you can see here, this is where you get the no audible release consonants here. So instead of app, we say app. Okay, so instead of tap, we say tap. Example for this is a, which means duck. AAT, okay, so again, a no audible release T. So instead of a t, like at, we say at. Okay, so instead of cat, we say cat. Example would be sad, which means to kill. Finally, we have AAK. Again, the K is non-audible. Okay, so instead of back, we say back. Okay, so at, back. Example for this would be hat, which means guest. Next up, we have the single A's. Okay, so with a single A, okay, be careful because a single A is not really pronounced like a sound. Okay, that was our double A final. A single A is pronounced more like a. So it's like a phonemic pronunciation for Okay, so bear that in mind. So like from up. Yeah, so there is actually no example as A being a final, like individual final. So that's why the example is clear. There's nothing in there. Okay, so let's go to AI. Okay, AI again. It's kind of like e, I. It's kind of like Thai. Okay, so I from Thai. Okay, so example for this would be Sai, which means west. AU, okay, again, it's not ow, like cow, because that was AAU. This is RO, RU, O. Example, ngao, which means cow. AM is like okay. Example, some, which means deep. AN is like from under. Example, mun, which means to ask. ANG is like from hung. Example, tong, which means to wait. AP, again, you've got your no audible releases. So up from cup. Example, chap, which means juice. AT, so it's like from utter. Example, chat, which means 7. AK is like from duck. Example, muk, which means ink. So next we have the E's. So E is pretty much like in English, sound. Okay, so the final E is like from Ted. Example, te, which means car. EI is pronounced like A as in play or the letter A. Example, day, which means ground. EU is like u, ew. Example, bell. Notice the shape of my lips, bell, which means to drop. EM is like M from them. Example, lemon, which means to lick. ENG is like eng from ginseng. Example, lang, which means pretty. EP, again, you've got your P and your K no audible releases. So it's like from bicep. So gap is your example, and this means to pinch. And finally, we have EK. So it's like an ek from trek. Example, like, which means clever. Notice there is a star against del and get. The EU and EP sounds are very uncommon in Cantonese, and there are very few words that actually use EU and EP. So that's just a little note for you. And also del and gep are variations of another type of pronunciation, which you'll explore more in future lessons. Next up, we have the I's. So I is pronounced E like T or the letter E. So example, G, which means letter. IU is again EU, U. Example, miu, which means seconds. IM is like im from team. Example, team, which means sharp. IN is pronounced like the in teenager. Example, teen, which means sky. ING, this one instead of being E, it's actually I sound. Okay, so instead of ing, it's ing. So just like sing. So ing, sing. Example, sing, which means stars. And then now we go back to E sounds. Okay, so we've got IP, which is like eep from leap. Example, yeep, which means page. Remember the P is an plosive, so there's no sound when you pronounce it. IT is like eat from sheet. Again, you don't pronounce the T. Example, teat, which means metal. Finally, IK goes back to being a I sound, so it's like ick from lick. Example, sick, which means to eat. So you have to remember for ING and IK, instead of I being pronounced E, we pronounce it like I. Okay, so this one you just need to remember. Next, we have the O sounds. So the O instead of O, like we have in English, is more of a O, kind of a longer, drawn out O sound. So O as in door. Example, saw, which means silly. OI is like oi from toy. Example, oi, which means love. OU is like O from goal. Example, goal, which means tool. ON is like on from dawn, but instead of it on being a longer sound, shorten it a bit. So example, gone, which means to dry. ONG is pronounced like on from long, but a little bit longer. So example, long, which means wolf. So OT is pronounced like ot from hot. Example, hot. Finally, OK is like ok from luck. Example, lock, which means happiness. Now as we have the U's. Okay, so U, okay, so it's more like a O sound instead of U. Okay, so O. So example, full, which means trousers. UI is like OE. Okay, so actually it's OE sound. Example, foi, which means grey. UN is like on from ornament. Example, kun, which is an official, like a government official. UNG, okay, it's like ong. Example, yong, which is to use. UT is like ought, literally like ought, but a little bit shorter. So example, foot. UK is like awk from awkward. Example, ok. Okay, so it is shorter than the awk from awkward. So ok, meaning house. Next we have some of these more complicated ones. So you go EOI, EON and EOT. So I couldn't find English equivalents for these because these are very interestingly unique sounds in Cantonese. Example for EOI is so, which means age. So the EOI here pronounces a O sound. O. You can think of like oh, but really posh. Think of like Queen's English posh. Oh. Oh. So. So. With the tone. EON. Example here would be sun. So EON is like a kind of sound. So sun means letter, as in a letter, like male. EOT, example, l, which means law. The EOT is like a kind of sound. Okay? Next up, you have another weird combination of vowels and consonants, and that is OE. So it's not like EO, okay, that's a different one. This one's OE. OE in general sounds like the from sir. So for example, g, which literally means a saw. With OENG, it's like from sir plus ng. Okay, so example, sung, which means to go up. Next we have OET. Okay, again it's like the from sir plus the t. But funny thing is, there isn't really a word that has this final. So there's no such word that ends in OET. So it's just kind of there. Next up we have OEK. So again it's like the from sir plus the k, but inaudible k. So for example, jerk, which means to wear. Next up we have the YU, YUN and YUT. So YU, think of it as a single vowel. Instead of pronouncing it as U, as in like you, it's actually more like U. So Y here is a semi-vowel. Okay, so don't think of Y as a consonant, but think of it as a semi-vowel. So U, like hoot. So YUN and YUT is generally used after another initial consonant. For example, su, which means book. Notice I didn't go su. It's as if the Y is not there. So su, YUN, example, soon, which means sour. Again, notice I don't pronounce it like soon. It's just soon. And then finally, YUT is pronounced suit. Again, not suit, suit, which means to speak. Finally, we have the M and NG finals. So M and NG are nasals, okay, which means the air is articulated through your nose when pronouncing M and Ng finals. So it's like M from item, and it's like Ng from sing. Example from M is literally just which is a negating particle, like to not. Next up, we have which is the number 5. Okay? Fantastic! So we have successfully gone through all 58 finals in Cantonese Jyutping. As usual, thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, learned something new, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!